And give us some video here.
How's your family doing down in Texas?
Okay, no,
All right, we are live.
just like a mess down there. Everything, food and whatever. All right, sorry to cut you guys off.
All right, it is July 21st, 2025. The time is 5 o'clock. This is a meeting of the Silverton Housing Authority Board, and I'll call this meeting to order. Roll call, please.
So I don't have the roll call sheet, but I want to note that Jim, Amy, and Tyler are absent for the record, and that we have staff present is Lucy, Anne, and myself.
Great. And so we have Carl, Dana, Lindsay, and Ron. Wonderful. All right, I am going to pass it over to you, Anne, for our agenda item. Well, let me ask, do we have any staff or board revisions to the agenda? Okay. We'll open it up for public comment. I do think our one person in attendance is gonna be, like, that comment can happen later, right? Or discussion, right? We have a presenter, not a public commenter. Yes, that's what I'm trying to say.
Unless you want to do a public comment as.
Yeah. All right.
You're the presenter.
Yeah. We're gonna open up for public comment. If you're in person, you can make a public comment. If you're on Zoom and you'd like to make a public comment, you can click the raise hand button and we'll promote you to panelist. Does anybody on Zoom have a public comment for our housing authority meeting? And no in-person public comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll close public comment. We'll move to agenda item. Let's see, where I am, hold on, my document, it's busy, just a second.
Yeah, the agenda's on page 2.
Yep, there we go. Now we'll move on to agenda item 3, approval of the June 2nd, 2025 meeting minutes. Was there any board discussion or changes to the meeting minutes as presented?
I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from June 2nd.
I'll second.
Great, thanks. Roll call, please.
All right, so we'll just go down the line here.
Thanks. You're wearing 2 hats today.
Couple, Carl.
Yeah.
All right, and that's a yes?
Oh,
Yes. The meeting minutes.
Lindsay?
Yeah.
Ron? And Dana?
Yes,
Excellent.
great, thanks. I know, we're a little out of our sequencing here. Yep. All right, we'll move on to agenda item 4, presentation, Silverton Critical Mass and Jordan Bierma. So now we'd love to have your public comment, Jordan. And Anne, I don't know, do you want to kick us off from the agenda?
I will just let Jordan take it away.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, I guess at the beginning, I just want to make a couple of little clarifications and caveats. First being the numbers on here, I realized when I was reviewing everything are from the 2024 rather than 2025, so it'll be slightly off. Compared to what was online, I could only find 2023 and 2025. And then in terms of the guidelines I'm presenting to you, they're meant not to replace any of the existing guidelines that are contingent on any sort of grant funding that only uses AMI as the requirement for those grants. These guidelines that I'm presenting are more with the idea of them being used as informationally or educational material for current or prospective landlords or tenants, whether that's like through an online portal, through education classes of like know your rights or how to be a good tenant, best practices. That's kind of the goal for these guidelines, just so I can kind of establish some parameters of where we're coming from. All right, so we can kind of move on to the next slide. In terms of like how we got here, this was something I brought up a lot when I was on town council, and then have kind of further worked on this with some other folks in town about why some of these rental guidelines need adjustments. So the next 2 slides is kind of a comparative analysis of how AMI is used in 2 different capacities to really show the differentiation between the 30% that CHA and HUD recommends and how they come out to be drastically different numbers depending on whether or not you're applying for an affordable home or an affordable rental. So this first slide would be an example of 100% AMI family applies to buy an affordable house, where I would say actually AMI is used really well. So AMI is used as the entry measurement right now of like, are people allowed to purchase a home? And then from there, it goes through all these different filters, whether that's mortgage brokers, lenders, home assistance organizations, et cetera. And they use a whole bunch of other metrics after the AMI to then calculate and that determination of what would be an affordable mortgage for this family. So using their calculations in an example scenario, a 3-bedroom house with a family at 100% AMI is going to have a mortgage somewhere between $1,300 and $1,500 a month. Again, that might be slightly higher now that the new AMI numbers came out, but it should relatively be within that range, which comes out to be about 30% of housing, of their 30% ratio that CHFA and HUD recommend. And then if we look at the next slide, it's giving you an example of the same family, 100% AMI, going through the rental process. And this would also be through like the CHFA and HUD recommendation of 30%, where AMI is used as the one and only metric and the end measurement. And that comes out to be classified as affordable at $2,450 a month, which is roughly about 1,000 times more per month. That's also classified as 30%. So there's some really big discrepancies with CHFA and HUD and the numbers that they use to calculate that 30%. I've advocated to CHFA and HUD as an individual that they need to kind of look at their math, and I think it also would go a long way if like the town and housing authority also kind of advocated for some changes. But I also know that like you guys, for a lot of things, are bound to AMI when it comes to grant stuff, which is why I'm saying, okay, the next guidelines that I'm proposing, let's not use for anything that's tied to grant funding, because that makes it more difficult in that scenario. But we could use some more accurate numbers to our community for when we're talking about like housing education and when we're talking about just general recommendations to any landlord or tenant in town. And then again, just highlighting some of those, the outcomes of creating better rental guidelines is that it actually does align better with the CHFA and HUD recommendations at that housing cost ratio. It provides more opportunities for renters to actually save up and purchase homes if they're only spending 30% of their income rather than 50% or greater every month. And it also provides better tools for landlords and renters to negotiate fair rental rates. And then the last one, it also accounts for the general skew because renters generally are lower income than homeowners. So it kind of helps to account for that skew in the data as well. I guess maybe I'll pause here for a second. I don't know what you guys prefer, if it's like a more open-ended discussion or question and answer. The next 3 slides are what I emailed to you a while ago. If you want, we can kind of go through these together and I can present them, or if you've read them from the previous email and have questions about them, I'm happy to kind of do it that way if you guys have a preference. But again, it's a side-by-side comparison of how the like left-hand side of the current rental guidelines that are strictly AMI based. Right hand of the column is the proposed rental guidelines, which is like a weighted blended income based guideline.
Does the board have questions, preferences, want to go through some of this? What's the sentiment? Okay, I think keep moving. I mean, I think you can keep going, Jordan, and I have a couple questions at the end.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we can kind of come back to that because really the end is just kind of the goals, right? The goals is to kind of use this as a way to open discussions and get questions from you guys and hopefully have some direction of where we go from here and be incorporating this into some housing education, whether that's for tenants, landlords, general community. And then ideally, a future goal would be approved in some sort of amended guidelines that are specific to Silverton that really feel like they fit this community in an affordable manner.
I think a question I had was, well, first of all, thank you for this. I mean, I think it's a really important discussion because a lot of what we in the Housing Authority have necessarily focused on is homeownership, right? That's been kind of a big push. That's definitely been a focus for lots of really great reasons, and we've had a variety of great funding sources and projects to get us there. So thanks, Anne. But I think the rental discussion should not be overlooked because we have a number of workers in our community that rent, and we need those folks in our community. I think an area where I was sort of stuck on, and I don't know, Anne, if you can provide some insight, but I was kind of looking at our Housing Authority website of like, well, where do we talk about rental guidelines or, rents and stuff? And then we have some of the numbers that Jordan's presented. And so we have on our website, the 2023 area median income. And on there, we have a maximum affordable monthly rent. And those numbers for like a 3-person household or 1-person household, those numbers seemed more closely aligned to like the 1,300 to 1,500 mortgage rate that you said. And so we have that, but then we also reference rental rates in our guidelines for the Silverton Housing Authority. And I'm wondering if some of the disconnect between these different prices is coming at all from occupancy and bedroom sizes.
And I know,
Talking about the same number. That's what
I
I'm,
noticed that too, that there's a discrepancy. So like we hit 2023 and then after 2023, we switched to bedrooms rather than persons.
right.
Um,
So.
I don't know.
Yeah, well, because basically to put a finer point on that question is so when the main place where I think a renter would go or a landlord would go to look for San Juan County information on our Housing Authority website is where you would find the San Juan County area median income chart. And that chart has like a 3-person household at 100% AMI. The, affordable, maximum affordable rent would be 1,900. And then when we look at our guidelines, we're talking about 3 bedrooms. And then that's where we get the 2,450 that I think you were referencing, Jordan. Is that where you got that number?
Yeah, and I think that the 2023 ones are doing a better job at getting to that point. Because I've noticed that once we go to bedrooms, it's making the assumption that everyone occupying a bedroom is a working, contributing person. And I think there's multiple groups, right? Families, disabled, anyone who might be in a household that's not working full time. It wouldn't account for that.
Yeah. So I don't know, Anne, you're the one that's put the most brain power into this. Do you feel like the occupancy and some of the guidelines we have around like number of bedroom units that we're selling, listing for sale to people is kind of skewing some of these numbers, or what? Can you speak to that at all?
So since 2023, AMIs have increased approximately 7% each year. So that is automatically where part of that increase is coming from. What I do every year when HUD and CHAFA release the new numbers is I directly copy and paste from CHAFA. So that must have been an internal change from bedrooms or from people to bedrooms. And looking at CHAFA, they do income limits by people, but rents by bedrooms.
Right.
Right. Sale price for homes is based on bedrooms. And I think the reason for that shift is when you're building a pro forma for a development, you have your income, your rent revenue, and that rent revenue has to be a static number, and usually it increases every year, even in affordable CHAFA, like low income housing tax credit program, rents have to increase in order for these to work. And so the difficulty, and I absolutely see where, like, these are people that we're talking about, not bedrooms.
Mm-hmm.
However, when you're building a pro forma, you don't know who is going to rent these properties. And so when you're trying to decide if you can charge for how much you can charge for a 3-bedroom and assume that 3 people are going to stay in there versus 2 versus 1, like you have no idea. And you don't know how many people are in that household are going to be working.
Mm-hmm.
Like you just have to sort of use a number and stick to it. From the pro forma standpoint in order for these projects to get off the ground in the first place. And so looking at our website, housing resources, tenant resources, landlord resources, I haven't adjusted it since 2023. However, our guidelines have the 2025 numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because any home or property that has a housing authority use covenant on it has to have a maximum rental price that they can charge. And I just haven't updated
Yeah.
2025 numbers to the landlord resources or tenant resources just because I honestly
Been building.
haven't thought of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think I'll say one more thing and then we can circle back to things, or I have a bunch of things that I could talk about too. But the intention behind the guidelines is to regulate the projects that we are responsible for. And so it's not intended to be a broader landlords in the private market, this is what you should be charging.
Mm-hmm. Or this
It has affordable. Right. And I've used the 2023 numbers up until now for sort of that purpose. But the guidelines, that is not the intention. Like we have to follow those.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll leave it at that for now.
I mean, Jordan, you and I have chatted. It sounds to me like kind of the disconnect and the where we are is that, to Ann's point, the guidelines that we have are for Silverton Housing Authority projects in particular. And what your point has been is like, but we also want a mechanism where local renters and landlords have a place to say, well, what actually is affordable, as opposed to just the market rate or something. And they're just going to our numbers because that's what's available. Like, I guess my question is how is this playing out in practice?
Yeah.
Because isn't it likely that the market rate is higher than what we'd like to see anyways?
I mean, I can, yeah, and that's like information that's hard to gather.
Right.
I can give you like an anecdotal example, because I've been a renter here for over a decade, of when my rent has changed. My landlords have specifically referenced the town's website as a resource of like, well, this is what is classified as affordable, and this is my justification for raising your rent 40% this year.
Mhm. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
that's my to your point of like, we make recommendations, but then like, there's no enforcement mechanisms because they're just a recommendation. And so it's just a way to be like, hey, landlords, this is like what's affordable, but also you could go to Facebook and be like, well, someone's like renting this place for this much money and like, that's, what I'm gonna do too. There's like a market,
Mm-hmm.
rate and then the suggested. So I'm kind of like, are we actually solving a problem, or are we just putting out more documents that are like, here's what we think you should do?
And I guess my pushback on that would be that it gives more power to the tenant to actually have that discussion with their landlord. Because right now, if I go to my landlord and I say, this is how much money I make, like this is what I can afford to pay a month. They're gonna say, okay, well, you want me to lower the rent lower than what is deemed affordable by the town, which seems like a big ask. But if a tenant came to their landlord and said, actually, I want to be charged like the affordable rate based on what my income is, because those two things are going to match now. I think it gives the tenants more power to actually just have that discussion, right? There's no enforcement of it. And it's just, market is what the market is, but it gives them at least an ability to go and start that discussion. And then they can also use that. And, you know, I think I've talked to Ann when I was on town council about maybe doing like housing education classes of like, part of that is like, as a tenant, you can contact San Miguel Power and give them the address and say, okay, what is the average utility rate that this property has been paying in the past, so that I can have an estimate, right? Some of our old rental units, you're paying, you know, $400 a month if you have a lot of leaks going on, but.
Yeah, yeah. So it's a way for tenants to advocate. To me, this is more about like a renter education tool as opposed to a framework for Silverton Housing Authority projects, because we have other requirements for those. Yeah.
I will say, I think there's, and I listed this in the memo under, what do they call them? Recommendations or options. I think there's absolutely space for both our guidelines to exist and this alternative calculation that we can use as a measuring stick to hold ourselves accountable when and where we can financially, and also as a resource to like help give local context as to what's actually happening with our AMIs. We do run the risk of like, hey, we're building however many apartments in Zanoni. We have to charge like pretty darn high rents. This is just me forecasting. We might figure out a way to make this not be the case, but it also like, it's really challenging to say like, we need to charge these maximum rental rates instead of what we are acknowledging is the actual affordable.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, like, that's just unfortunately our situation. And,
Yeah.
you know, if we're hurting other renters by not calling the flaws in the AMI calculations, it could look bad on us. And that's just something that we'll have to deal with then. But there are new programs like tenant equity vehicles and credit building systems that we can include in our rents in the future. But I do think there's space for both. I would advise against officially adopting those rates in our guidelines, because that could tank a project for us. But yeah, I think there is room for that to work. And like on our website, we can change, and in the guidelines, we can change it from maximum affordable rent to just maximum rent. Be like, hey, we're not necessarily calling these affordable. This is the max. So there is like linguistic changes that we can make without biting ourselves in the butt later.
I think that would be a really good idea. I think something as simple as that does speak to Jordan's concern of like, landlords are using this as a tool, and we can't like change the way that we structure rents, but we can communicate about them in a way that I just really like the calculations that you've done here. And I think, you know, having just a little bit more about the difference between how we structure our programs and then like what really is an affordable rent. I think that's something that is not too difficult to communicate, but a lot of people maybe don't understand that difference, who haven't attended all these meetings and been in the weeds with the grant programs, et cetera.
That linguistic change in our guidelines. So it now just says maximum rents on the like resource page. That isn't correct anymore. And I would like direction on what to do with the resource page. Also noting that we're almost at time.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Yeah.
So my other question is like, we're probably not the only one experiencing this discrepancy. What have other communities adopted something similar? Like in your research, have you seen other use cases?
Not a ton, unfortunately.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, honestly, I think Ann makes a really good point. I think people are gonna be okay with it as long as you acknowledge it. I think the struggle for a lot of people is being like, it says this is affordable and this is like 60% of what I make in a month. Like,
Mhm.
just mentally like trying to balance that. And I think having those two options could help at least make sense of things for a lot of people. And I totally get how you're tied to that in a lot of ways. And I think when, changing how we frame that in terms of the vocabulary used around it, I think is a helpful start. And I also think like as the town council, it's like the housing authorities and town council's responsibility to like put the check kind of on things, especially because I would contend that we don't necessarily have a market with the amount of occupancy we have in our rentals. And it's kind of up to town to say, okay, like you can't just keep pushing this number further when people can't afford it. And even if you just say that, and like there's no way to strictly enforce that, but I think saying that would mean a lot in short term of it.
Thanks. To your point, Ann, I do know that we have limited time. We're moving on to, we have another point on the agenda, but it seems like we're kind of in this place and the board's gonna have to decide of how we want to phrase it and nuance it. Because basically, we have Jordan's, again, I like your calculations a lot. I think that's super, it's a more localized context for what really is affordable. It puts the Silverton Housing Authority in a challenging position for future rental projects because we are saying, here on our website, this is what is affordable. And hey, by the way, we're building rentals and they are subsidized. But the rents we're going to have to charge to build this project is not going to match what we say is affordable. And we just, if we're going to move forward with an alternative on our website, we're going to have to acknowledge that and deal with it.
Which might impact our occupancy rates, which might impact the viability of a project. So, yeah, it is a risk.
So I think, on the one hand, it feels kind of simple to update this and it's just like, what's the big deal? It doesn't seem like that big of a deal because these calculations seem very logical and rational and reasonable. And we're also stuck in kind of the larger bureaucracy and economics of projects that we're trying to fund and build and rent. So what kind of staff direction would the board like to give to potentially move forward on this? I heard you say, Carl, we changed some of the language to say maximum rent as opposed to maximum affordable rent. Does the board want to have some other document created that is a more nuanced view of rents on the housing resources section that's separate from our guidelines? I suggest that as a possible way to move forward. Or does the board feel like that puts us in a challenging position with future projects?
I think, maybe one way to address that is instead of including numbers, have a document that clearly articulates like, this is how affordable rent is calculated.
Percentages.
And percentages, that's widely available everywhere, but to have it, coming directly from us, like, 30% of your income, these are some example numbers. If you're earning this income, this is what you can afford. I think something as simple as that, well, getting away from like, as much as I like the blended income calculation, I think that then puts like a specific number and that gets into that sticky situation. That's what I would propose.
And you were going to say something about that?
Just when we're thinking about options, like I don't think, well, maybe in Carl's case, I don't want to put it on our website. I'd link to additional resources like critical mass. I don't know if you guys have a website or not, but these are your resources. Just to add a little bit of that buffer.
Sure, as an entity, yeah. Okay, that's an interesting idea. Thoughts, Ron?
Personally, I'd like to see us stay the way we are currently until we get our projects going, because I don't want to see those jeopardized. Then if we see we can make some adjustments, let's do that at a later date.
Jordan, what are your thoughts on the idea of if critical mass had a website, throw it up, put your slides up there, have your sheet. Is that an option?
Yeah, and I like Ann's recommendation too, of I also think having that ability to have I guess a level of filter to these are the numbers that this other group came up with. we're just showing you that. I think you could also tie that into like education classes. Like if you did want to do some like sort of like tenant landlord housing class, it could be, put on by the Silverton Housing Authority and critical mass to give you that level of like filtering of like, no, these aren't our numbers, but we're working with an organization that has another way to look at things in town. And
Well, and even in our housing resources section, we could have something to your point, Carl. It could be like, here is our housing guidelines. This is what will likely be used for future rental projects, right? I mean, right now, we don't have a rental project in play, but there could be several options. Like, these are our guidelines for projects that we own and manage. To Carl's point, typical best practices, people should not be spending more than 30% of their income on housing.
Mhm.
Just leave it at that. Then the landlord has the conversation with the tenant. And then here's a link to a local entity, a local coalition, or whatever you want to, call your guys self, that has some more information on a more nuanced perspective of local rent. Something like that. I don't know. I think I want to make sure that we keep kind of this buffer. Or it sounds to me like the board is not ready to say, here's the table of critical masses presentation. These rents are what we're like adopting. I sense some hesitancy around that.
I mean, to Anne's point of just, the separation, I think, is key there, just out of abundance of caution. Feels like we're, millions of dollars are on the line,
That's not to say that we'll always charge the maximum rent. I think we should formalize a standard or practice that will keep the rents as low as possible, but we need flexibility.
Great. So what is your capacity to move forward that just in the housing resources section, it doesn't have the 2023 information anymore? And if and when Critical Mass has a website, we could link to it there with some language.
And I'm also happy too, if you don't want to make a decision and just think about things, like my kind of impetus for talking today is just to kind of begin that discussions that we can kind of work together as things progress forward. Cause I mean, I don't want you to jeopardize any housing projects. Like I know exactly how hard it is to get money for them and I'm sitting over there.
I say, let's just address this at a later date.
I think it's really important context. So,
So is that direction to remove the 2023 guidelines from the resources?
I mean, is it helpful to update it with 2024 or do we just, what?
It would get higher and higher.
Yeah, exactly. What do you think?
I mean, the guidelines will still exist, and so someone could go find those, but under like tenant resources and landlord resources, that could.
I'm just wondering if we should remove, under landlord resources, we have San Juan County area median income affordable rent prices. Maybe we should just remove that. Great. Does that? Then we're not presenting what feels like too high. We're not presenting anything, but then keep having the conversation of how we can point landlords and tenants to more nuanced perspectives. Jordan, what is your thought?
Wish we just had like an AMI figure that's just renters. Like that would be much more useful than these AMI figures that include.
Yeah, and I did my best with a few other people to try and get, and that's where the estimate came from in our calculations. And that was like about 70 cent standard deviation that we ended up with of like, based on the available data we have, this is our best estimate of just the renters. Yeah, I totally agree. It'd be awesome to see what it is just for renters.
Do you think it's more helpful for us to take down the 2023? And not have 2025?
Yeah, I kind of feel like that's up to Anne. I feel like those numbers are actually like pretty close to the ones that I came up with, or we came up with when we calculated them, and I mean, it's kind of
Yeah.
up to you.
Yeah, but
But then it's hard because it says 2023.
it says 2023. Yeah, I mean, we're dealing with a situation where we think 2025 numbers are too high. That's just basically
Yeah.
the thing, conversation we're having. So.
Just looking at La Plata's website and they have 2024 up. I don't know, just in like, what do regional partners have? Could
Mhm.
someone just like kind of call us on only having 2023?
And the thing is that Chafa still has these public too.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's always and these,
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yep. So is board directing that on the website, we want 2023 down and updated with 2025, or we want none?
I think it's best practice to put up like the most recent numbers, just even though they are higher,
I agree with that.
it's just best.
Keep it up to date.
always- Yeah, as much as that's,
I mean, it's in the guidelines.
yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. This is just me
okay.
pushing back, but I'm open to it. If the 2025 numbers are published and they are on our website, but if we take them out of landlord resources, maybe that'll help the influence on the private market that it is having. I don't know.
That was my suggestion of not having it in there. It's in the guidelines, but if we're not advocating this as a resource because we're seeing it used in a way that
Mhm. Yeah, I
is
mean,
potentially a problem.
That's how we keep our website up to date. Remove old information.
Okay.
yep. Just removing the 2023 guidelines.
As races, yes.
Maybe in a future, like update of the guidelines, we'll implement some sort of standard that says we try to keep rents as low as possible
Yeah.
when and where we can.
Yeah, and I think just for the community to acknowledge that really we've been heavily focused on really big home ownership programs. And that's where and your website,
That's where the money is.
that's where the money is. Exactly. It's a game of chasing where the funding is. And so, and your website is great. It has a lot of really helpful resources and recognizing that a lot of what we've been working on has been for home ownership. And so rental stuff become both actual units that the town might build and resources for renters. So we're not ignoring that. We're just playing the prioritization game. Jordan, thanks for coming to the conversation.
Then me?
I think it's really helpful to have some local context, so.
And just from the board, if and when critical mass publishes or posts the numbers, would you like the Housing Authority website to reference their website, those numbers?
I mean, I think that's what we were just, I think, yeah, like, that's
I
kind of the
think
sense I was
some
getting.
language about what critical mass is and, you
Yeah.
know, this could be a helpful context and
Mhm.
local context. Yeah. Any disagreement on that? Clicking? Okay, great. All right, thanks, Jordan.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, I know we're pretty much out of time, but Lucy's here, so hanging on. We're moving on to agenda item 5, the director's report. Yeah, so go ahead. Thanks for coming, Jordan.
Thanks, Jordan.
I'll keep it really brief. Anvil Townhomes, our funding gap is filled.
Woo!
Our construction loan closing has been delayed due to our general contractor having difficulty getting a guaranteed maximum price from the subcontractors. We're almost there, but we're expecting to close on the loan in early August. An unforeseen but major circumstance that impacts our project is CDOT has width restrictions on Colbang Pass for the rest of the summer. And they also have width restrictions in Pagosa Springs. Pagosa Springs is a 2-year project, so this summer and next summer. They've expressed that they will accommodate a similar project. So the boxes, townhomes are 16 feet wide. And so Ignacio's doing a phase 2 of their project with the same boxes, and CDOT has expressed that they would be interested in accommodating Ignacio's project. So hopefully that can apply to us. We haven't decided officially to move the transport date until the spring. I'm going to have a conversation with CDOT this week the balance of how far into October are we willing to risk this or push things? And that is a very difficult decision. The boxes are gonna be staged at Purgatory likely. And then it'll probably, this is all estimates at this time. Highway 550 will probably have to be closed for 2 nights to transport the persons. So I'm working with Tributary, with Bating West, with CDOT to figure out what the best option is. The good news is that we just got an influx of cash from the Colorado Health Foundation. We have our DOH grant and we have a low interest portion of our construction loan. So if we push it to next spring, we're going to minimize our interest carry over the winter, which we were going to do anyways. But I just wanted to put that on your radar. Public Works, though, will begin installing the public utilities next month. And then on August 4th, during our next meeting, we'll go over the Annville Townhomes Ownership Program eligibility requirements that we're going to adopt into the guidelines. And I'll leave it at that.
What was our, if there was no road closure, what was our ideal feasible transport timeframe?
It would be still similar because the boxes won't be out of the factory until September anyways.
And the intention was to stitch them together in October.
Yeah. So it's just
one adventure after another.
CDOT has been awesome, very responsive. They'd love to accommodate us if they can. We have a date now for when they'll be out of the factory and ready for transport. So then I can communicate to CDOT.
Is the Pagosa, so CDOT would need to accommodate us in both Pagosa and Overcolding?
We have a backup plan to go through New Mexico.
Well,
Which we knew about this whole time, the cooling one we didn't.
did you know your job was logistics? Forget housing, logistics and supply chain. How do I get these boxes from Grand Junction?
They can't go over Red Mountain, so.
Yeah.
And
And just for the record, we did talk to the train about putting them on the train. That was gonna be pretty cool, but they're too wide for the train. But it would have been super cool to bring the houses in on the train.
so we are still moving forward. We just don't know how and when, and that is where it gets difficult to communicate to prospective buyers. That's the hardest part about this whole thing. The loan, the timing of construction, like that's all doable. It's maintaining interest. From my perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
but
Well, from the board, you will just keep us updated, and at some point you may need our support in making a decision on the time.
yes, and we may just have to make the decision on our own.
Yeah.
Okay.
We get them over in helicopter? Look at that. Some big birds up there. No.
Kind of cool.
Affordable housing, like.
Yeah, tunnel.
They ship things
Bring money.
in October. Will we have some kind of protection over the top of these in case they get snowed on?
So once they get to Silverton, it would be an expedited process to get the trusses on, to get them.
I mean, when it's stuck at Purgatory waiting,
Oh, yeah, they're fully weatherproofed.
okay?
And if they spend the winter in Buena Vista, they'll also be weatherproofed. Or we may push them down the production timeline. Like, we just haven't fully decided which direction we're going yet. And so option B has an option A, B, and C. So
Yeah.
it's a can of worms, but
Thank you, Anne. It's been one thing after another with this project. It's really has. Any other questions for the board on the director's report or anything else that you wanted to add? No. Shout out on earning the executive certificate. And again, just, these are huge projects that you're carrying forward. So a lot of appreciation of being the momentum rolling. Yeah. Okay, anything else? Great, okay. All right, so that is the end of our Silverton Housing Authority meeting. The time is 5:44 PM and we'll end the Silverton Housing Authority meeting and we'll move on to our work session. Does everybody need 5 minutes? Are we ready to go?
Yeah.
Ready to go. Okay, moving on. Let me get my agenda. All right, the time is 5:45. It is July 21st, 2025, and this is a work session of the Silverton Board of Trustees for Brownfields prioritization. Trustees and board members present are Ron Wakefield, Lindsay Halverson, Dana Kranker, and Carl Schnicker. And we have staff of Ann Chase and Lucy Hill and Ashburger. Thank you. Yep, and yeah, that's it. All right, so Lucy, take it away.
Okay, so as we have discussed, the town has received an 800.
And Bevan, sorry, we also have Bevan. Sorry, I didn't see you over there, Bevan.
The town received an $800,000 Environmental Protection Agency or EPA grant for the environmental assessment, cleanup, and revitalization of brownfield sites in 2013. And as a reminder, a brownfield is a property where the presence or potential presence of hazardous substances, pollutants, or contaminants may inhibit future use or redevelopment. And really the goal of this grant is to revitalize environmentally impacted lands in Silverton and support the reuse of those properties. And our grant application and work plan highlighted affordable housing, recreation, and community use as key priorities for the future reuse of brownfield sites. And the sites included in the scope of our work plan for potential prioritization included the Boxcar Apartment site, which is in Annville for the future development of affordable housing units, the Lackawanna Mill site for potential reuse of a community space, the Animas River Corridor for accessible outdoor recreation and trail system, contributing to the perimeter trail, and then the Cement Creek Corridor for future outdoor recreation use. And so far, we have prioritized the Boxcar Apartment sites and the Lackawanna Mill site. And so really the purpose of this work session today is to bring you all an update on the work that we've done so far on these sites, as well as some information we've gathered. And then to receive direction on how to kind of move forward in prioritizing sites. So any questions on the Brownfield grant before we jump into some updates? Okay, cool. So we'll start with the Boxcar Apartment site. So far we have completed a phase 1 and a phase 2 environmental assessment of the site. And the results of those have been presented in previous work sessions. And that land has been conveyed from the county to the town. And so these reports found that the contamination levels are higher than residential standards on a portion of the property, specifically lot 32. And cleanup will be required before the development of any residential dwellings. And so the next step, if we were to move forward, would be to develop a remedial action plan or a RAP to inform the cleanup activities. And this will cost $30,000 from the Brownfields grant, and it will lay out the cleanup plan and include cost estimates. So before we move forward with that, since that's a significant cost, we wanted to provide you all with an update, get direction. And so I will hand it over to Anne, who has a few updates on the Boxcar site.
So last time we met about this was in April. And so adjacent to the Brownfields grant, we have the More Housing Now grant through DOLA. And that is funding engineering and infrastructure plans for Boxcar site. And we spent about half of that grant, and we ran into we noticed that part of the property was in the county's avalanche zone. And so since Annville is now annexed into town, we need to know if it's like red or blue avalanche zones. So I needed direction to pursue getting a avalanche hazard assessment for the properties, which was outside of our scope, but we did it. And the good news is that it's not an avalanche zone. Which means that if we were to continue on making progress with this project, that wouldn't change the remaining budget and scope with our engineers for the project, which is good. And that doesn't, or it means we don't have to build to a certain standard for avalanche requirements. So that was a big win in making this project a little bit more feasible. So.
Sure, yeah, and I think just to add to that is that the current constraint really is the cost of the pre-development on this site.
Still a tricky site to build on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
The site preparations.
yeah, that we have.
Look at it, see what they think of it.
We've had conceptual plans done, but we haven't specifically asked the builder what they think.
I mean, SGM has been consulting with us on this.
SGM is our engineer, hired engineer for the engineering plans.
Yeah.
So it's a difficult site for sure. And it would take a lot of infrastructure. Brownfields, the consultants for brownfields and our consultants for the engineering could work together through this remedial action plan to come up with a way to minimize, rather put the expenses more on the brownfields grant during the cleanup rather than like an alternative source of funding for the infrastructure.
It sounded like you were saying that some of the slope stabilization or some of the stuff that would make it buildable could potentially be integrated into the cleanup plan.
How much have we spent out of this $800,000?
We've spent about $178,000. And the remaining bit needs to be spent before 2028.
That's on page, what? Oh, 18. 18?
I like that first. Oh.
Under grant spending, okay.
And
Yeah.
And sorry, on the site preparation one too, the other funding source could be DOLA. Is that like our suspicion and where we could ask, or we talk to DOLA about that as a possibility
For the infrastructure?
for the site preparation? Yeah.
So, the Energy and Mineral Impact Assistance Fund, what specifically, there's a More Housing Now grant part of that. We have the pre-development. And my next step was to get the infrastructure development. I have heard from the Division of Local Government that the More Housing Now funding is not coming back.
Yeah.
EIAF may not be coming back. If it does, we could still apply for it, but we would be competing with like other towns doing water infrastructure. So it would be difficult.
We definitely heard at CML.
That's what I was wondering. CML was pretty dark on that sometimes. Yeah.
But that has big implications for the Zenoni parcel as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Any more thoughts or questions on the boxcar site?
And we'll circle back.
Yeah, why don't we move to, why don't we kind of talk about these all in the whole context? And then I think we can talk through them in kind of prioritization, yeah.
Okay, that sounds good. So then the Lackawanna Mill, we have done a phase 1 and a phase 2 environmental assessment of the mill. These reports have been presented to you all in the work session. And the reports have also found that the contamination around the mill is higher than recreational standards. So cleanup will be required before any redevelopment of the site. We are also about to get back a structural assessment. The work's been done and the report's being drafted right now. But so far it looks like the building is in really good shape for reuse. It will require a lot of work to rehab the building, but that's going to be minimal, major structural work. The EPA also provided the town with free renderings and cost estimates of the redevelopment of the mill structure, based on based on the Kendall master planning visions for the Lackawanna Mill. And these renderings and cost estimates were intended to be used for a future community visioning session on the reuse of the mill. But future or previous ideas of site redevelopment included a community center, recreation center, classroom, et cetera. But something that could generate funds for the town. But it would require additional community visioning before we did that. So if we were to continue down the path of prioritizing the Lackawanna site, we would want to get a remedial action plan, do community visioning, do the site remediation, do the building renovations, and address access improvements. So that's Lackawanna Mill. And then the Animas River Corridor has also been identified as a potential project. So when I'm saying the Animas River Corridor, I'm referring to the recreation and public purpose lands that are currently owned by the BLM under the RMPP agreement. In this moment, those lands are not eligible for brownfields funds because they are owned by the BLM. However, they could potentially become eligible for land conveyance. And if the land is conveyed before the grant deadline, we could potentially use this as a site. We do expect that if the land is conveyed, it will come with a phase 1 environmental assessment to inform whether any parts of this land need to be cleaned up. And if that is identified, we could potentially use our grant funding to do that. It gets tricky with the way the land will be conveyed and that it's currently owned by the BLM. So we are currently working with the EPA to determine whether that site will be eligible. So I don't have a definitive answer, but I wanted to just give you guys that context too. And I also wanted to highlight that there is an error in the memo, just to let you all know that the town requested 1.72 million from the Natural Resource Damages Trust, not 3.3, and that 3.3 reflects how much money is being allocated to the region. So those are kind of the sites we have, and we are looking for direction on how to prioritize these sites with this additional information. Again, the money needs to be spent by 2028. And the purpose of this grant really is to revitalize sites for reuse. And so staff is recommending that we move forward with the project or projects that the town would like to see through. The EPA doesn't want to see lands cleaned up and then remain undeveloped. So we just wanted to present that information to you. You'll see under options, moving forward with one site at a time, or we could go out and do a wrap for, 2 sites and compare, but that is a significant, $30,000 is significant. I'll hand it over to you guys if you have questions.
Thanks, Lucy. Question for staff, if you were gonna look in a crystal ball. I know your answer would probably be no money. There will be no money for no things in the next foreseeable future. That's what we heard at CML at least. Very bleak. So we have a housing project, we have a community space project, and we have like a recreational corridor project. Does anybody have any guesses or senses on other sources or the most likely types of funding in the future for those kinds of projects? Anybody want to make a guess?
I could tell you what's most popular.
Okay.
In terms of funding from like the federal level, like the cleanup of old brownfield sites are actually pretty popular. And those seem to be like still getting allocation of resources. So I actually don't think it's as bleak as you do.
But then so we have the brownfield funding.
No, but there might be
More.
potentially.
Okay.
I mean, don't want to say there's more funding ever,
Yeah.
but if there
Yeah.
is a program that tends to be popular and bipartisan, it's like brownfields cleanup projects.
So my question kind of is, if we were prioritize 1 or 2 of these, does the third have another likely source of funding? Or if the brownfields, obviously doesn't cover any of these to completion, which one of these is more likely to have additional sources of funding to go to completion?
And I think Lindsay brings up a good point. I have seen this, this trend of, the brownfields grant is EPA's kind of like, it's their biggest program. And so that's, I think, something to note. I think that, what we're worried about is that we will clean up the land and then we won't be able to move forward with the project. So I think it's that kind of after cleanup funding.
Exactly. That's what I'm concerned about.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
For both projects.
Yeah.
Feds did just pass an expansion of the low-income housing tax credit volume, which we probably won't qualify for because our projects are so small. But that was a big win for housing, actually. But getting to the point, yeah, that's gonna be hard. It's hard.
I think I foresee money for cleanup. It's the taking it to the next step that is my question of which one of these is most likely to find funding. But maybe things could change in 5 years. Who knows? Thanks, Jim. I'll note for the record, Jim has joined us. Thank you. We appreciate all of the boards that you are serving on, and we're glad you're here.
I have a question on the Animas River corridor, on the land conveyance, like where are we on that? I think you kind of been more involved there. Like, is that still is happening? It's not happening?
Gloria, RMPP,
Sorry.
do you want to talk RMPP?
Yes, and actually, we're gonna have a executive session on Monday
Okay,
to discuss where we're at with the RNPP and our negotiations with BLM.
okay.
And to note, the Animas River Corridor project, the whole thing we proposed is a $5 million project that we have only asked for 1.7 from the NRD funding. Gloria and I are having a meeting with Jake and Anthony on Thursday to kind of talk about other funding sources. Because again, we're all looking, where can we get money for wetlands and where can we get money for bridges and where can we get money for trails? So all of these, Lackawanna, Boxcar, and Animas in particular, they're all priorities for the community and they're all big ticket items.
If I were to boldly say what I would think would be a priority, it'd be like housing is like number one. And then being able to kind of, depending on how negotiations go and like what other funding sources would be like between like Lackawanna and Animas River. I think those are pretty comparable for like what we get, but housing, I think, is clearly, it's like just the most pressing need.
Well, and I think Ron brought up a really good point last time we talked about the boxcar appointments, which is it's free land, but it's very expensive free land.
Yeah.
It's expensive to build. And I was just kind of looking at, okay, we always can have options of where we spend our money. It's just about what type of money is available. And I was like, well, what other rental units are out there for the town to buy or acquire or build? And right now in town, you can purchase a 5,000 square foot infill lot for $300,000, right? Well, maybe you could put a duplex on that, maybe a fourplex, I don't know. The Highlander's 2.5, the rentals that are next to the hardware store are $980 or something. And my question to you two is there funding out there to purchase properties like that for the town to deed restrict and create affordable housing? It's like, we've been pursuing Boxcar as potentially affordable rentals because it was kind of in front of us, because we had the land for us to use, we had the Brownsfield funding to clean it up. But is there other funding to preserve affordable rentals for a town like us? Hands nodding, yeah.
Yeah. It would be like the DOH application that I just did, but 10 times worse.
Like if we wanted to go.
But possible. However, it's hard because we don't have any equity. We don't have anything that we could put down. There are ways that we could figure it out, I think. It would be a challenge for sure,
Mhm.
but I don't think it's impossible.
Because when I think of prioritization of rental, I agree with you, Lindsay, is I think the box, like affordable rentals to me seems like such a high priority. And we just talked about in our housing authority meeting, it's something we've identified, we're working really well on for sale units. But what do I hear all the time in the chamber meeting and elsewhere is we need affordable rentals. And so then I start thinking, well, you have to compare what the options are in front of you. The options are in front of you are this building
Mhm.
that's for sale, this lot that's for sale, or this free land that's complicated to build on. And so I think that's kind of a question for the board is, if that's a top priority, then is the boxcar apartment the right path to go? Because it's land we own and we potentially have funding to get it ready to build, but then it's expensive. Like, I guess I would ask you, Ed, is do you think it's more likely to have funding to go purchase something that exists now or buy an easier lot? Or do you think it's more likely to have funding to build on the boxcar site when it's ready? Or is it kind of the same thing? And if you need time to think about that, that's.
I definitely need more time. My initial reaction is that funders like new
New building.
stuff. However, there is, on a national level, there's thousands, if not almost 1 million units that are affordable with low-income housing tax credits that are about to expire and become vacant. And so there's a whole new push for preserving and preservation.
Yeah.
So that exists. We would be competing for funding against new.
Yeah.
So I don't know how we would do, but that's my initial reaction, and I'm happy to circle back with more information.
Jim, we're off mute.
Sorry, yeah, go ahead, Jim.
Oh, sorry, I thought you went off mute and that was my
No,
bad.
I'm just listening.
That's all right. So question to the board is like, if you were to give kind of a ranking of priority of these things for the community, Lindsay kind of stated hers. Anybody else want to make a different pitch? Or wait, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I want to be clear, Ann and I aren't asking you to rank like what's the most important, is it housing or is it recreation? I think what we're asking is the boxcar apartment feasible enough
Yeah, to move.
to move forward with it and prioritize this grant funding to that project? Because that's kind of been our priority. But we just want to bring all of these factors and make sure we're still on the right path with this.
Because we're at an inflection point that if the board said, well, boxcar, it's our priority because affordable rentals are our priority, but this site in particular is XYZ challenging, then you would shift focus to the other options.
Absolutely.
And Lucy and I feel your pain.
Yes.
On this conversation. Both projects, all projects are extremely challenging.
Yeah,
So,
And important.
yeah.
a lot of unknowns, so it's kind of like making an educated guess in a way.
What thoughts, Carl, Ron, Em?
It's a tough one. All three have issues. The Animas River corridor, we don't own the property yet, so that's an issue. And then mitigation on that. Lackawanna, if we go forward with that, there's a tremendous amount of maintenance involved with buildings, and we seem to have trouble funding maintenance on our buildings. And the boxcar cost per square foot of building that's just gonna be astronomical. So.
Yeah.
Free money is expensive. No. Carl, Tim, insights to bring?
Can I just, one thing I was reading recently that, oh, sorry, Jim, just that anytime you add units to a market, it's good for overall cost of that market and helping either decrease or maintain. So like, even if it's really expensive to build, like adding units, even if they're more expensive than we think they'll be, is still beneficial to the market as a whole.
Because to Jordan's point, we don't currently have like a rental market. You said this before, Ann,
Yeah.
because the occupancy rate is so hot that there's like. Carl, thoughts?
Yeah, this is a tough one. I don't have like a specific inclination other than that I think the boxcar project is cool. I think that it serves a need. I think that it addresses our priorities. And, not to get too stuck on, yeah, we have this free land, but we do have this free land. And I think that, I agree with you that the value of a project like that might outweigh its dollar cost. And it should if we do it right.
Jim?
Yeah, two things. One, the River Corridor project. That's partially about owning the land, but really it's about getting the easements. And I think once the easements are in place, it's probably going to be the fastest project to complete with the less impact as far as just dollars and cents. Portions of it, of course. The housing situation, you're going to see your most expense on the front end, which is what we will experience. But once those are completed and that inventory is on the market, you're going to see that dollar amount, essentially our investment, will bring the entire system down, which is going to be great for Silverton. It's both in the completed product and for the cost of doing product in the future, constructing product in the future.
I was gonna be so cool to have Lackawanna Mill usable and not be like scared to walk my dog over there, like. For
It
sure.
is such a cool asset. Yep.
I think my point about the brownfields funding being like popular is that I don't think this will be our last chance to like
Yeah.
do these
Yeah.
types of projects.
Yeah.
Is kind of what I was like getting at in a way that wasn't helpful, but.
Well, then to that point, maybe one way of proceeding is to say, okay, the Lackawanna Mill, we've moved forward in some really great options, but to me, it also is one of those projects that could be like many of our other really great projects that's ready and has great insight, but can sit on the shelf for a little bit until the right opportunity, the right visioning, the right plan comes forward. To me, it feels like the Animas River Corridor, man, it's been sitting on that shelf for a long time. It's like, it is due, it has grown up, it's due to be funded. And I think the boxcar to me feels like just such a high priority because it's kind of what we have in front of us. I mean, I hate to think like, well, we put all this work in and so we have to keep moving forward. That's not always the right way to think about it, at least according to my husband. But I think that to Carl's point, like there's still a lot of opportunity there, and Jim's point, like having another apartment unit over with everything else we're doing just somehow feels right. Like it feels like the culmination of a lot of things that we've been doing over there. Because the alternative is sort of like, well, what purpose and reuse does that land have otherwise?
That could make a great park.
Yeah.
That's a county decision though. Cause when they conveyed the land to the town, it has a clause, a reversion clause. Yeah. That if we don't develop it within 7 years, it goes back to them. We could approach them before then and say, hey, it's gonna be really, really hard to develop this. How do you feel about a park? We just have to hit a percentage amount of AMI distributions in Annville in order to fulfill a grant agreement that the county made with the state years ago. So if we can figure out how to meet that AMI distribution without bringing in 14 new low income homes, I think we could do it. I've done the math and I think it's almost there, but that would be a conversation with the county before we can say, hey, let's just make this a park. But it's not off the table. Well, it is until we have the conversation.
Yeah.
I mean, I do think some of the problems the apartments have there are gonna convey to the boxcar as well. I mean, they have a lot of issues there.
Based on the site. Yeah. I mean, they were the test case, so we can account for what's happening. I mean, so Anne and Lucy and Gloria, you guys have, the memo was excellent and provided really great information in detail and lots of information of where we are. You guys live and breathe this every day. You work on all of these sites. You know their importance to the community. You know the other options out there or not. I mean, do you have a recommendation in particular on the boxcar sites? Because that has been a priority of the board for a while. And the last inflection point we had was based on the avalanche study. So it's really great news. I feel like that helps us make our decision, but it also means, well, maybe then we just keep moving forward because that was kind of what we were saying last time. Do you guys have any recommendation on whether you think that is the way to go with the boxcar site or not to keep moving forward? Or a hedged recommendation?
I think that our overall recommendation, I'll let Lori and Ann go further, is that we just want to prioritize a project that we're really gonna get done, you know? And I think that we just, you know, there are constraints to the site. So we just wanted to check in and make sure like, okay, we're acknowledging that this is a really hard site to develop. It's gonna be expensive and funding is limited. Are we all on the same page to continue to move forward? And if we're not, then here are 3 other sites we could look at. I think that that's kind of why we brought that to you, and that would be my recommendation. I don't know if you guys, something else.
That was very diplomatic to see.
You're a politician.
Been doing this for a little bit.
You've been doing this for a while now. Yeah.
I'm being unbiased. I used to have a really clear, this is how we're gonna do this, I can like see the funding steps. There's a huge hole in the infrastructure. We've faced the same exact problem with Zanoni. It's gonna be really hard. If we step away from boxcar now, I think that's okay. We can come back later if we figure it out. Zanoni is gonna be an easier parcel to develop. It's gonna be more expensive. It's gonna be like 3 times the amount of units as boxcar. So it's gonna be even more expensive.
A bigger project, but more units.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's there. It would be really nice to finish Anvil and wrap it up. It won't hurt my feelings if we leave it behind. This is a really tough one. I don't know.
Do you think that moving forward with boxcar like precludes some of our options with Zanoni? Funding wise, staff capacity wise, timing wise, all of it. Yeah. Because I think it's important for us to consider these all in the whole context, like.
And last week I was in favor of prioritizing the Lackawanna Mill, because I had found a grant that was going to get us a bridge that would go across the Animas. And then this week they pulled that grant. So it's hard.
Yeah.
Because it does rely on outside funding that we have absolutely no control over. That does not help, but that's where I was at last week.
Yeah,
I was so
That's kind
excited
of like.
about
what-
Lackawanna Mill,
Yeah.
and then they pulled that funding,
Yeah.
and it was like, well, I don't know if this is
Yeah. Was that federal or state?
federal. It was the FLAP funding, the federal access to land, public
Public lands.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's like whack-a-mole.
Yes, that's part of what we were gonna present, but then we took that out. So, you know, things change really quickly, but also things change really quickly.
Yeah.
You know, so like, you know, I think we're at a point where, you know, we move forward and, you know. And I also, you know, I do want to just, we talked about this before, but I do just want to say that, you know, Ramble, our Our environmental consultants have identified a few areas in the pre-development site preparation that could be tied into the cleanup. So that's also a factor to consider, like having this funding, cleanup funding will be helpful too.
Well, and let me say this, like, what is the harm? What is the harm? So the site has to be cleaned up regardless. Well, okay,
Yeah.
well, if we use it for recreational use, it doesn't have to be cleaned up to the same standard, right?
It depends what that use looks like. So lot 32, it doesn't meet residential standards. I'm not sure if it meets recreational standards, but it's also covered with trees. So lot 1, which is the lot that's cleared, is cleaned up to residential standards.
Right. So I was gonna say, well, if we wanted to turn it into some other use to Ron's Point Park, we still might have to do cleanup, but maybe we wouldn't. I mean, what if we were to spend this funding we have to do the cleanup and the site prep? And then that space is available for something. Available for what we want to in the future. And like if stuff for Zanoni came up sooner, we can pivot to that. We can talk to the county about the clause in there and just keep that conversation open about our timing. I mean, because to me, I look at this and I still say, I think affordable rentals, if you ask most people in the community, I think they'd say affordable rentals are our top priority. It's what we need. But my question would be, well, in what form? Boxcar apartments, infinity parcels, something else? And so I would prioritize the rentals. And my question, I think, to staff is, well, we have this Brownsfield funding. Is it best used to make housing? Or is it best used to do something else? But it
That's
seems
what
like the perfect use of funding to make that site usable.
Yeah, I guess what they're asking.
I know,
us.
I know. I know.
Stop, no reverse hard.
Reverse. Yeah, no, it's reverse. Skip. I tell you my windows skip.
I think I'm still on the side of continuing with like the boxcar apartments. It's like, I think it's a lot of money to try to figure out and it's a lot of work, but I think again, it's just when you're in a housing crisis, you have to spend like you're in a crisis and usually that is a lot of money. There's an emergency, you gotta spend money. So that's really tough. And I think the others are really nice to have, like, yeah, Lackawanna Mill is cool and it'd be like a really cool space. Same with the corridor. I would love to be able to get over that river, but we're in a like crisis. So that's where I'm still on a bit.
Well, and we have the funding to get the site ready.
Yeah.
Like, we have the funding to get the site in a place where it could eventually be buildable, right? We have the cleanup funding and we have the, for it to be clean, yeah. But we can potentially, and then through the more housing now. Yeah, I don't know. It feels like we have the funding now to move this project one step forward. But it's really up to the board. Is this?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Could it be used for mixed use? Including rentals,
Boxcar.
boxcar,
Like commercial?
well, commercial on the ground floor and then apartments above.
It's not zoned for that.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Where are you at, Dana? That's a lot of questions.
I would really like to move forward with boxcar. But I feel so many unknowns on like. It's possible that the site isn't even affordable. I mean, again, it's like, okay, if you had $2.5 million. Just cash and you were given cash, I'd probably say, well, we should go buy something on the market now that's ready to go and we can rent it, and we can deed restrict it and away we go. But like, as a municipality, we're always in the grant game. You're in the game of whatever funding is available here. And so you turn sites that aren't ideal into the things that the grantor is willing to give you money for. And I feel like that's where we are, which leads me to kind of think, let's keep going.
I just think we're gonna have too many issues. I think even after it's built, there's gonna be issues at that site. With drainage, to build it, I think you might even have to do blasting.
Thoughts?
They've done that in previous areas there. I don't know if you guys have checked that out yet.
They've done geotech. And I haven't heard any mention of, no. In their cost estimate for site prep and infrastructure, that was not a line item. I can follow up for sure.
Bevan, you're familiar with that area, the apartments over there. I mean, cost wise, do you think there are structural things that we can do to build units there? Or is it cost prohibitive?
I think,
Not to put you on the spot.
no, not. Right. Yeah, I mean.
Again, we won't hold you to the quote that you
Certainly more affordable
places.
places. And where I was going with the multi-use was maybe a little less restrictive for the environmental aspect with commercial on the bottom, but, or garages or, you know, with apartments above. Or storage. I talked with someone about putting storage units in. It would probably be recommended to just do some kind of slab instead of a crawl space or basement. And then is the access going to be from the existing road driveway that,
There's a lot of infrastructure questions.
Yeah.
so yeah, there are definitely more affordable places for us to build. But there are, and you know, are apartments the right use in that location, even though we need rentals. They could potentially be unreachable based on the cost of construction there. So what were your concerns with the existing apartments?
All the water that's in the crawl space.
Yeah.
That's big.
Yeah, that
A lot of
was,
issues.
that's snow, it was primarily snow and drainage mitigation, but
But I think you'll have the same thing there at the boxcar.
The engineers have designed a drainage system behind the property with, have a whole drainage plan. Not to say that it won't be a problem, but it is something
Engineer it.
about too.
They freeze up in the winter, so we need to get rid of some of them.
Mhm.
Yeah. Jim, you're there. I see you moved around. Thanks. Thoughts here?
Thank you. I would hate to abandon any sort of construction of affordable housing and indoor apartments. Looking at it, looking at the numbers, I don't discount anything that Ron has said, anything that Bevan has stated. And if there is a better way to do it, then I think we should look for it. But I do not want to abandon affordable housing and or affordable apartments for the town of Silverton. That is my absolute stance on this. And maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe it just can't be done because the landscape has changed, financing options have changed. But I do think for the future of our community, this is one of the most important issues.
Yep. I mean, I think Bevan, I agree with you that there's probably a lot, and Ron, you brought this up a number of times. There's definitely more affordable ways to go about doing this, but they're not on land we own. And they're not on paths we've already gone down where we have kind of, I can't think of the right term now, but just we have benefit already invested in this site because of how much time and energy we've put into it and thought about it. And again, that doesn't mean you keep going down a path if you determine that this is not the right thing. But when I keep going back of like, well, sure, if you had the money, you'd go buy X and you'd buy an infill lot that was super easy, but that just doesn't exist, and the money for that doesn't exist. And so I keep thinking, well, I kind of think moving forward, this project is sort of the best thing we have to do. I don't know, Carl, other thoughts?
Yeah, I agree completely. I think that the challenges are present, and I think that that's been something we've always known, and it's just, now that we're in this environment where we feel extra uncertain about the future, we're looking at all of the other uncertainties, including ones that have already existed, and we're getting more nervous about them. And I think that's the right place to be. I think we should be thinking about this very carefully. But I agree with everything that's been said. Like it's the priority for us right now. It's the priority for me. I think this is something that's really important. And I think we pursue it until we get a little bit more clarity.
Lindsay, other thoughts? Going or?
I think we keep going until we can't anymore. Housing.
Or we make it happen, Lindsay.
I mean, I think we make it happen. I just there's a lot of uncertainty. And sometimes I just think it's kind of like that, the mentality of we don't know the circumstances. You just have to make the next move and make the next move and make the next move, which you've totally been doing, Anne. And props to you. And this feels like the next move is to just keep using these funds for the most basic urgent need in town. Even if it's a silly place to build it.
15 units, is that was recommended?
14.
14, okay.
The memo says 12. Are we 12 or 14?
I wrote that and I was misinformed, sorry.
14.
It's between the two. It
depends on the site.
Well, it depends on the responses that we get from the eventual RFP that we release.
Sure. So 12 to 14.
And I'm trying to find that old sketch. Do you remember what meeting that was in? I'm looking.
The Housing Authority
If you
website.
go on the website.
So it was on the website.
And has all this.
Okay.
Evan, what were you gonna say about units?
I agree. I think that knowing that we've got the townhomes coming as, purchase, I think it's critical that we have we focus on rental properties to both make that available for those in need in town, and then also to diversify our investments,
And I think that there's also an option. I mean, Jim, you kind of made this point, Lindsay, you made this point that even if this pencils out that these are not low income housing, adding new apartment units to Silverton can help affect the larger rental market. And the price point of these may change.
Yeah. Well, and just to add, I was reading Austin has been really focusing on just increasing overall stock of units. And then now Montana's doing the exact same thing, and they are seeing prices come down.
Right. It is supply and demand. I mean, that does have that does come into play here.
And that is a good article about Montana because it lays it out.
The miracle in Montana, right? I think is what they're.
I mean, even if someone was willing to pay a higher price for an apartment, there's not even anything available. We don't have these kinds of units available, regardless of what price point. Okay, so I'm hearing challenges, concerns, but in general, a sense to move forward with Boxcar as a site for apartments. Does that feel crystally muddy clear?
There's the animus.
That was the animus.
So I think that, so you would like us to move forward and have the remedial action plan done for the Boxcar Apartments and just move forward with that.
And attempt to
Understand.
make the site as ready as possible with the remedial action plan.
I understand.
Do you need any other direction in terms of the other projects and where to spend money, or no?
Only unless you'd like me to do a remedial action plan for the Lackawanna Or we have asked the questions we can about the Animas River corridor, and we are just waiting to hear back.
Yeah, but I mean, in general, you still need to spend more funding, right? Like,
Is that like the $30,000 is the cost for any of the RAPs, or is that's kind of just?
That's the cost for the boxcar site. We did not request a cost estimate for the Lackawanna Mill site, so I don't know what it would be exactly, but it should be, it's the same thing, so it should be in that ballpark.
so the $30,000 is to move forward with the remedial action plan, and then based off of that, we could have a cost estimate for site remediation.
Yep.
And there's the potential to use brownfields funding for site remediation.
Yes, so once we get this remedial action plan, that should lay out, you know, what part of the cleanup activities, how we could take some of the site preparation and put that into the cleanup activities and then give us a cost estimate.
So potentially the better process is to wait till, if we're gonna move forward with Boxcar as a project to keep funding, then the better process would be to check in after the remedial action plan of the Boxcar to then determine sort of what budget are we left with to work with.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, great, okay. Board thoughts, I'm hearing yeses. Jim, yeah, go ahead.
All right, and I know I'm coming in late in the game. Talking about potential land around town that might or might not be available. A couple years back, there were a couple locals, one in particular, that was willing and wanting to owner finance some property for the town of Silverton in our efforts to land bank. I don't know if that's still going on with us or with this individual. But I think there might be options out there. Again, I don't want to muddy the waters. You guys have probably already covered that. But I know that there still might be options out there if we're looking.
Do you know of a really great site to build 12 units? That's infill and doesn't need a lot of infrastructure, Jim? You don't have that, just kidding. Yeah.
I think like all options can be on the table, but tonight we're
Yeah.
focusing on the money that we do have
With brownfields.
right now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not opposed to exploring other options for other projects. But tonight, just focusing on where we want to spend the brownfields money.
So it sounds like clarity on moving forward with the RAP for.
Yeah, thank you. That sounds good.
And just work on getting those trucks over there. Figure out. That's so wild. Okay, let's see, Lucy, did you need anything else from us for direction?
No, I am all set. Thank you.
Great. Anything else from the board? The good of the order? Okay. All right, the time is 6:37 and I'll adjourn this work session. Thanks, everybody.